in our English language, we require the word friend to do a lot of heavy lifting and to mean a lot of different things.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Changes Big and Small. This is your host, Damian. Changes Big and Small will help you take action in your life with intention and purpose. In each episode, I invite you to take action to live the life that you want. Today's guest is Kat Vellos. Kat is a connection coach and trusted expert on the power of cultivating meaningful friendships. In her former career as a user experience designer, she researched, designed, and advised on the user experience of apps and websites, serving millions of people at companies like Slack and Pandora. With the publication of her first book, We Should Get Together, Kat turned her background in experience design towards combating the loneliness epidemic with the goal of helping millions of people experience greater wellness and fulfillment through thriving platonic relationships. Her interviews can be found in a variety of media outlets, including the New York Times, Real Simple, NPR, and the Good Life Project. Kat is also a sought-after speaker who has graced the stages of TEDx, San Francisco Design Week, Design for America, the Transforming Loneliness Summit, and many more. You can learn more about her by visiting Kat Vellos, KatVellos.com. Thank you, Kat, for joining me today on Changes Big and Small. How do you define a friend?
I would define a friend as a positive and committed relationship of choice that two people, let's say, choose to go into with each other with a degree of enthusiasm, positivity, and commitment for each other. Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that I especially love about friendship, that it's a relationship of choice. Mm-hmm. And maybe people can say that's also true about your partner, but I think it's also a very generous relationship in that you can have multiple friends as well.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not a one-on-one monogamous. It would be silly, right? To say like, oh, well, I have a friend, so I can't make any more. So it's a little bit more, I guess, polyamorous. You can have as many friends as you can maintain.
I like the idea that you just brought up, that you can maintain, because often I hear people say, I want to have more friends, or I need to find more friends in my life, or something of that nature. But I think often people don't really have a sense of what they mean exactly when they say that. Like, what kind of friend are you looking for? I always think about this meditation talks about this child saying, like, yeah, I believe in Jesus, but right now I need a friend with skin on. And so the whole idea of how do you envision your relationship with that person? So if somebody is thinking, okay, I need more friends in my life, I want more friends, or anything of that nature, what should they be thinking about in terms of the different types of friendship?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would encourage someone in that situation to be more specific. So thinking about what kind of friend do you want? Do you want them to be in person? Is it okay with you if they're just on the internet and on the phone? Is it someone that you want to do activities with? Is it someone you want to have heart to hearts with? What do you envision the friendship activities even looking like? How close do you want to be with that person? Is this like a fun party friend, or is this like I need to process my therapy sessions with friend? Really understanding what our intentions are for friendship is important, because the word friend is defined differently by different people. It means different things to different people. And in our English language, we require the word friend to do a lot of heavy lifting and to mean a lot of different things. And so because it's so easy to misinterpret or to have differences of opinion about what we mean when we say friendship, it's really important to be clear about what you are looking for in a friend, or if you want new friends, plural, are there different varieties that you want those friendships to look like?
Yeah, this is making me think about a friend of mine, and she's a close friend, but sometimes she'll be like, oh, this person's your friend, right? Because you had coffee with them. And I'm like, no, they're not my friend, at least not the way I define friend. I'm very open to having coffee with people and having this kind of casual connection. That does
Right.
not mean that we're friends.
And that's like, sounds like an acquaintance, which
Exactly.
is a real type of relationship. It's not an insult to say this is an acquaintance. It's a different level of closeness and it's a different kind of casual interaction. And so it sounds like that was an acquaintance for you, not really what you would consider a friend, which sounds like there's a little higher bar for. Would
Yeah.
you
And I
say?
think different people probably have different definitions, like you said, because for me, the people that I count as when I talk about a friend, I tend to think about those people that are closest to me. And I say the people that I like take a transatlantic flight for is kind of
Yeah.
how I think of it in terms of the level of closeness.
Yes, definitely.
We touched on there are different types of friendship, like remote friendship. Is it somebody you want to be able to talk to on the phone or somebody you want to be able to do activities with in person? How are
Mhm.
remote friendships different than face to face friendships?
Remote friendships are different in that they have more flexibility in terms of the way that we conceive of them because they're not tied to a single place or the tangible face to face world, like you're around the corner from them or something like this. I find that there is an ease and flexibility that's a little bit more spacious because it can take the shape of anything that we like and it can take up as much space in our day-to-day life as we again have room to maintain with our calendar, with our ability to communicate variety of asynchronous or synchronous remote formats. And so there's something that I've actually found a lot more appreciation for, especially in the last 3 years of the pandemic. Obviously, many of us were maintaining so many of our professional and personal relationships remotely. It's something that I've gained a much stronger appreciation for. While the book that I wrote was clearly targeted at in person, face to face friendships, like saying it's important to have these in your life, it's not enough to only do virtual. I also have a much, much stronger appreciation for virtual and remote friendships as well, now that we've had to practice so much of that, even with our friends who might have been close by in the pandemic, but you might have only talked to them from a distance or remotely during the last 3 years.
Maybe I should have even started with the question of how are they similar? Like, in what
Mhm.
ways are those two still friendships that
Yeah.
have things
So
in
if they're
common?
similar, yeah, they would have the same traits, right? So in the book, I talk about the 4 seeds of connection. So you hopefully have some compatibility, you have chemistry with this person. Those are things that will be similar. Otherwise, why would you then want to commit to it, right? And if there's commitment, that's again something that's similar between them. Is there's a mutual dedication to maintaining and growing that friendship. There is going to hopefully be some level of frequency, whether you talk, some people talk to their friends every day, some people talk to their friends once a month, but there's some kind of a recurring frequency that happens that maintains the friendship. And then the last seed of connection, of course, is proximity. And that's kind of neither here nor there if you're talking about remote friendship versus an in person friendship.
For me, I've lived in so many different places. And so, how much each of those different seeds matters at a particular point depends on how strong that
Mm-hmm.
friendship was. Like,
Yep.
how much time did we have in proximity to each other where we could develop these close connections before I moved away or before they moved away?
Exactly. Exactly.
But if your friendship is only based, like you, for example, during COVID, I did a workshop and I met somebody. We decided to create our own little mastermind together. And I would consider them a friend, maybe not quite transatlantic yet, but definitely more friend than acquaintance. And we have met face to face once, but we don't count on meeting face to face on any sort of cycle. So for myself, I've been thinking about this like, what is that kind of friendship where we don't regularly plan to meet together? It's based on some shared interests. I don't want it to sound transactional, but we
Mm-hmm.
serve each other in some way. And
Mm-hmm.
I kind of make more time for her than for some of my other close friends. So I've been thinking about what does that mean about this friendship versus my other friendships?
It sounds like there's a mutual commitment in that situation for you both to put in the effort of ensuring that any interaction that you have is not the last one. And
Yes.
that's what's different than maybe some of the interactions or coffees you might grab with an acquaintance is like maybe with the acquaintance, it's okay for both people if like, cool, we had a nice conversation. And maybe it's okay if this is the only time we talk to each other, as opposed to with the friend, there's not only an expectation that like this is not going to be our last conversation, but there's also an effort made to ensure that it is not the last conversation because you're both going to follow up. You're both going to check in. If you don't hear from the other person, you might get worried. Those sorts of awarenesses and almost promises are there towards keeping the friendship going.
And that sounds like one of the key things of friendship too, right? That commitment that you talked
Yes.
about earlier. And so, still kind of keeping with the idea of remote friends and face-to-face friends, you're an expert on this. So let's say you move to a new place, and so you want to make friends in that place of people you can do things with, face-to-face friends, but you also want to maintain those close friendships with people that are not in the same place as you, who are remote.
Mhm.
What practices do you put in place for those two different types of friends?
Yeah. So in that situation, advice I would give around practices to have in place is to ensure that you're setting aside some time and attention for maintaining both types of those friendships. So the people you want to meet in your new town and the people that you have maybe left behind in your old town. Because what can happen, and I'm thinking back to a very specific story that a long time ago, a friend had told me where she had moved to another country. And I checked in, and it sounded like this very glamorous adventure that she was on. And I assumed she was just having a fabulous time. We talked on the phone, and she was saying, actually, we talked on Skype because it was that long ago we were using Skype. And she was actually saying that she felt kind of lonely in her new place and she didn't like it. And she actually wasn't having a great glamorous time because she didn't know anybody there. And so, one of the ways that she was kind of soothing herself was that she was spending a lot of time on Facebook, only communicating with the people she had left behind geographically. And so, that was useful in that it provided her access to social support and to familiar faces and familiar friends. There was this comforting presence of talking to people that know you, but at some cost to investing in knowing anybody who was near her geographically and physically. And so, in that kind of situation, if all your eggs go into the bucket of like, well, I already know these people, so I'll just talk to them online, you might be missing out on the opportunity to meet the people that are right on your block or in your neighborhood or your apartment building and to really cultivate those new friendships that you need nearby too.
When we talk about investment and what it takes to actually
Mhm.
make friends, what are the common excuses that people give?
In the book, I have a long category of all the excuses people give. They're like, I want to do this, but that. I want to do this, but that. I call it the long list of big buts because it's like, but this, but that, but the other. And they really go into different categories of things from, say, like career demands. They're like, oh, but I work too much. My schedule is too busy. To like, I want to spend more time actually building my career and taking classes, say, about professional development. And so I want to invest my time in that instead of investing my time in friendship. There's also a huge category here in adulthood, which has to do with the investment people make in growing their primary romantic relationship, or if they choose to have kids, you know, cultivating that little family. That takes a lot of time and energy. And so sometimes that's where the energy and attention goes because that's their priority. It takes more priority than friendship. Sometimes now as well, there's a lot more emphasis on people having self-care time, right? Time for yourself. And I'm certainly not opposed to self-care. I'm an introvert. I need lots of time for myself too. But sometimes people are maybe too much going with the comfort of like, I'll just be by myself. I'm just going to have another bubble bath by myself. And it's like maybe the thing that would feel more nurturing is actually to have a really good conversation with a friend. And so again, I'm not down on the wellness, the self-care, the alone time. I need it just as much as anybody else. But sometimes I think it's easier to do that than to take the risk of attempting connection.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that this weekend, about the intentionality piece and also the different types of investment, because I have a friend visiting and she was saying, oh, do you want to go out and meet some other acquaintances, friends of hers, acquaintances of mine? And I was like, I think I'm just going to stay home. And I was observing this behavior in myself because it was like 2 or 3 times on the weekend where I kept making the choice to
Yeah.
stay home, just doing some self reflection and being like, okay, Damian, is this really what you need right now? Because like, is it that you've had a long week and you just need some alone time and recharging time? Or are you distancing yourself from social opportunities where it would actually be helpful for you to go out? And so I think that kind of self awareness interrogation can be interrogation sounds harsh, reflection can be helpful to see what would actually be beneficial for us so that we're
Mhm.
valuing our needs to be alone, but also to be in community, in social settings with other people.
Yeah, and it sounds like you had a really high amount of self-reflection, self-awareness, and even the self-questioning of, am I being avoidant right now? Am I choosing to be avoidant for some other reason I'm not acknowledging than just the surface reason of like, I'm just going to stay home, chill out by myself. Maybe if someone's in that situation where they think, maybe I'm being a little avoidant, then it's worth it to take that risk to reach out and go do something that might be social and might also be just as nurturing.
Yeah, and I think that's especially true for introverts. And I identify as an introvert,
Same.
but it's like I love my own company. And it could just be so great to just sit home all weekend and read a
Yeah.
book if nobody else makes the overtures. But we are social creatures too. And so I have to remind myself of that at times.
Yes, yes.
One of the things that you mentioned in the book is that group friendships are actually stronger than one-on-one friendships. And that can be really helpful when you're making friends. Why is that?
Yeah, and I want to contextualize that comment around it being stronger. It's not saying that they're better than one-on-one friendships, but it's specific to the context where you're wanting to maintain friendships. And in that situation, a group can be a stronger, more fruitful way to do that because what you get then is each member of the group is going to be maintaining the momentum of the friendship. So there's less pressure on, like, say, in a one-on-one thing, it's like, well, it's either you or me, the ball's in your court or the ball's in mine. And if both of us drop it, then it's done. Whereas if you have a group of 3 or 4 or 5 or even 6 people who are in a group friendship, then there's so many more opportunities for someone who's in that friendship to reping the group for re-engagement. And so it's a lot easier to carry something if like 6 people are holding it or 4 people are holding it than if just 2 people are. So in that way, it's stronger in that the likelihood of reconnection, the likelihood of re-engagement is just higher because there's many more people to share that responsibility. Responsibility sounds like, oh, it's like a big, heavy thing. It's like not a big, heavy task, but it truly is an awareness, a dedication, and some kind of responsibility to be like, oh, yeah, we're going to reconnect. I'm going to reach back out. We're going to reping each other. And so that work is just easier to share when more people are doing it.
And as you mentioned about the word responsibility, I think sometimes we can get in our own way because we think things should be easy. Like,
Yeah.
oh, you mean I actually need to make an overture? Like I need to consider, okay, I need to reciprocate, like I need to have a conversation about how often we want to meet or what my expectations are in this kind of relationship. I don't think we have to frame it as hard work just because it's work, right? And so,
Certainly.
yeah.
Yeah. One of the interesting things that I observed too with a lot of the people that I've talked to in this work and who've come to my programs is that when there is an imbalance in the effort exerted to cover that responsibility of maintenance and making those overtures, it's unfortunately a place where some small resentment can build up. Where if there's 1 or 2 people who are always doing the reach out, always doing the follow up, always doing the like, let's see each other again, and the other person or people is just kind of hanging back, never really reaching out, just waiting to be asked, they may not realize that it can be interpreted as a lack of responsibility, a lack of dedication, and a lack of care for the person on the other end who's like, hey, I would really like to be reached out to. I would really love to be invited to stuff too. Why is it always on me? And so that kind of imbalance is unfortunately a place where sometimes some tension or disappointment can creep into a friendship when that isn't shared.
Listeners may have already heard me tell this story, but I remember that I had a friend who we used to work together and we would do things together multiple times in a week. And there was maybe a span of a week or 2 weeks where she asked me at least 3 times to do something. And I said no, because I was busy. I had other things to do. And at some point, I noticed a shift in our relationship. It's hard to
Mhm.
know if it's because it was my own perception, because I was feeling guilty for saying no, or if there was really something, some sort of barrier between us. But I noticed, I felt something different. We actually had to have a conversation like, hey, I know I've said no the last few times you've asked me out. And please don't stop asking me out. Let's schedule to do something next week. It's just a really busy week. I think just naming things. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
easy to just let it pass, and naming things,
Yeah, you're
they
absolutely
lose
right
their
there. And that shows your mentalizing ability to empathize with how she might interpret your declining the invitations and putting yourself in her shoes enough to say, hey, I know I've said no, but I still want to see you is so important so that that seed of doubt doesn't really like plant for the other person.
Yeah, and I also hear sometimes friends say, "Oh, they've stopped inviting me," right? And
Yeah.
it could be because you've said no, and they just think they're saving you the trouble, and so
Right.
they're like, "Invite me next time, please." I think just so many things could be a little bit easier with some more communication.
Absolutely. Mhm.
One thing that I hear people talk about often is, oh, going on a girls' trip. I know some ladies, a group of four, and every year they go on a trip, and I was always like, oh, sure, I've gone on trips with girlfriends, but I often feel like I'm the glue that kind of holds that relationship together. It's like there is me and two other people, and sure, we'll go on a trip together, but it's not something we can plan every year. And I wonder, are there any special benefits if we don't have that kind of friendship in our life? Are we
Yeah.
missing out on something? is that I'm bringing a FOMO to the conversation here? But
Well, you're only
yeah,
missing out if you feel like you're missing out.
right.
Sometimes you're missing out and you're like really glad to not have to do that thing. And that's the joy of missing out, the JOMO. And so in that case, I think it depends on what your appetite and wishes are truly. For some people, something like a girls' trip or a friend's trip feels like a dream. They're like, oh, I really, really want that. I've never had it. For other people, they've had it and they're like, oh my God, it's not for me at all. I'm not someone who travels well with a bunch of people. And so they're like, don't want to do it, you know? So if you haven't done it and it feels like something that you want to do, there's nothing wrong with experimenting and trying it out to see whether it's by organizing and inviting people or by telling other people that you know, hey, I would love to be invited. I've never had a chance to do something like that. Another way to do it, if that feels too vulnerable or there aren't people in your life who want to do that, is to actually like add yourself to other retreats and groups that are organized by some organization or company, and you just like buy your ticket and you come, and then you get to meet new friends on that gathering, you know, on that journey together.
What do we gain from putting ourselves in those situations where we have a chance to meet new people, where we could develop some new friendships?
Mhm. Well, one of the most potent, powerful things about it is that when you are in a situation like, say, a retreat or a trip together with people, where you are meeting new people in a completely different context than the rest of your life, is that you're completely free of the distractions and obligations that would be with you at home. You also are generally doing many of the friendship building activities that are the strongest for bonding people. So that includes things like sharing meals together, having little adventures together, having the opportunity to form new shared memories together. And you're also generally have more flexibility with your schedule than you might have when you're back at home working full time. So if you're on a trip, it's like, cool, you have lots of free time. So you can sit and have a long rambling conversation, you know, by the pool or something because you don't have as many demands on your attention. One of the most powerful things about this is that it gives you the time to really log a lot of hours with a new friend very quickly, often much, much more quickly than you can at home when you are subject to your work, your life, your demands, your adult obligations. And so all of those hours that you log very early with a new friendship really do a ton to support the ongoing existence of that friendship over time. This is in the chapter that I talk about with hydroponic friendship. This is one of the things is like having a much more scaled up experience of closeness in a concentrated amount of time, like a shorter amount of hours, is one of the most powerful things that you can do to ensure that a new friendship lasts.
One of the blog posts that I read by you was about how poorly we connect people sometimes, how we just send this email like, hey, we think you two should meet. And then we pull out of the conversation and people have to figure out like, why is she putting us together? What are we supposed to do here?
Uh-huh.
Etc. And I think that as we go for healthier friendship lives, for broader, wider, whatever the word we want to use, friendship lives, one of the things that we could do is be stewards for other people and help connect them to friends. So, what are a couple of tips that we should keep in mind to do that more?
Yeah. So for anyone who's listening who's like, why are they laughing about this? What are they talking about? It's a blog post on my website where I talk about the ding dong ditch email introduction as opposed to the double opt in email introduction. And the metaphor there is you would never ring someone's doorbell and leave a stranger standing on the doorstep and then run away. But that's what happens when you make an email introduction that neither person knows is coming and neither person has opted into necessarily, or that both people haven't opted into. And we need to stop doing this to people because it is just read the blog post. I go into a lot of detail about it.
I will share it in the show notes.
And so one of the much, much better ways to do this, which is that double opt-in, is that it gives both people the chance to say yes, that this is something that they want. And people generally are more likely to follow through on something that they've opted into and said yes to in advance, as opposed to a total surprise that they did not opt into. And then the other thing is when the introducer, say like yourself, who's in the middle, who wants to connect these people, what you get to do is really like grease the wheels and like warm them up for each other by then when you make that introduction, you get to like share like, oh, this is person A and they're so fabulous about XYZ and they do this exciting thing. And here's person B and they're such a wonderful person because XYZ wonderful traits about them. And so you really gas them up. You really like give them like all these good vibes. And so both person feels like, wow, I'm so flattered. And then they get to understand like what the benefits and joys are of knowing that other person on the other side. And because they've both said yes to meeting, there's this more mutual enthusiasm and a higher likelihood that they're going to follow through and know where to pick up the conversation. They know what to do with each other now, as opposed to it just being like, what am I supposed to do here? Does this person want something from me? I don't even know who they are. What is this for? Which is often how the ding dong ditch email intro leaves people feeling.
I have had all of those. That's when one of those has happened to me. And I don't think any of them has been successful so far. It's been like,
Nope.
I don't really know what, like maybe they would be a good friend, but I don't actually know anything. It's like people who try to set you up on a blind date, but they're just like, you should meet. And they don't tell you anything about the person or why they think you might be a good match. Always a no for
Exactly.
me.
No, it's not enough to go on. It's kind of like, do you want to come with me to this restaurant? And you're like, what kind of food? I'm like, they just have food. Sit down, eat it. And you're like, I don't even know if I want this. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, so definitely I invite listeners to check the show notes and go and read that blog post. There are lots of other great blog posts on there as well. So give them a read. You have a great sense of humor that comes through as well, Kat.
Thank you.
So I want to leave listeners with a more expansive view of friendship. How does friendship make the world a better place, not just us individually?
Mhm. Absolutely. So there's two big ways here that friendship is making the world a better place. One is that when we have more friendships and more, like I would just say, a friendly attitude towards life and towards community, we make our existing communities that much stronger because instead of regarding each other with doubt or suspicion or just coldness, right? We create warm and interesting and friendly environments to be in, right? So that's just like a nicer thing to experience as human beings. And on a grander scale, this helps to reduce the overall sense of isolation and loneliness that unfortunately is so rampant in our society. Half of Americans feel lonely on a regular basis. And the more loneliness and isolation people feel, it's not just a bad feeling emotionally or mentally, it's also really bad for our physical health. And so this takes a toll in the levels of heart disease and inflammation and dementia and early morbidity that we experience. And that's actually physical health cost. There's a medical health cost for our society on a public health scale when there is this pervasive sense of loneliness and isolation. And additionally, one of the other negative things about it is it can lead to more polarization, which we're already experiencing a lot of here, a lot of fear, a lot of distrust, and further widening of this gap between people, where instead of approaching each other with curiosity or empathy, there's just total fear and kind of pushing away others, anyone who seems like an other. And so all of this is really not great for the future of humanity. And so another really good reason to not just invest in cultivating individual friendships in your life, but honestly, like making your community a more compassionate place for everyone.
Yeah. On your website, we should get together.com. I already talked about the blog post there. That's where you can go, listeners, to read all of the blog posts. The first time I visited your website was probably a couple of years back. One of the things you've started offering are platonic matchmaking
Yeah.
events.
So
Also,
I
you've
do.
revamped your website and it looks beautiful.
Oh,
Say that
thank you.
too. So tell listeners about your platonic matchmaking events.
Right. So this is an event that I do called Here to Make Friends that basically gets people together who are all looking to make new friends in your life. And I do a really comprehensive survey of each person before they come in. And then with the answers that you supply in your survey, I will then match you with the people who are also attending that are the best fit for you based on what you each say that you're looking for. So it's like taking that double opt-in intro to the next level, which is like, here's really, I'm a friendship expert. I wrote this book about it, and you tell me what you're looking for, and I'll help you find the people that are in this room that you really need to talk to. And so that is the platonic matchmaking event. It's definitely, I describe it on the website as like, this is not a one night stand for friendship. It's not meant to be a one time meeting. It is for people who want to take this introduction and really run with it and really keep building after that gathering, knowing that you're already at a higher likelihood to succeed because of the intentionality in who you're matched with. So it's not random, like going to a random meetup and you're like, I don't know any of these people. I don't know anything about them. It's like, I'm
What
going
do
to
I
match
talk
you with the
about?
people. Exactly. Exactly. So that's the event. It's called Here to Make Friends. If folks want to find out the next time it's happening, they can subscribe to my newsletter where I also send invites to other kinds of gatherings and also Connection Club, which is my membership community.
And are those all in person gatherings?
These are all virtual. So started both of these during the pandemic. And because so many of my readers are around the country and around the world, we have members who join from all over the place. And so for the platonic matchmaking event, when people really do want to meet someone who's like also in their state or in their city, I do my best to match them with that. But sometimes, as I've told people at the gathering before, sometimes the person that you are most compatible with actually lives across the country from you. So given the choice between matching you with someone nearby that you're not compatible with and someone across the country that you are compatible with, I'm going to go with compatibility. I did this in our March event most recently. And these two women, like within minutes, they were like, oh my God, we're new besties. Thank you for matching us, even though we're in different, coasts. And they are off to a beautiful, beautiful friendship. It's one of my favorite success stories because it was a risk. And I went into it knowing like, this is a risk. I know that they're really far away, but it was absolutely the right thing to do. And they were like, OMG, how did you know we were going to be besties? So yeah, that can happen too.
I always like to give people an invitation of some sort of action that they can take.
Mhm.
Do you have an invitation for listeners of something they could do to foster their friendship lives?
Yeah. So, one thing that I would encourage people to do to foster their friendship life is to think about somebody in your life that you really appreciate being friends with, that you really want to continue building that friendship with, and send them a message today, not next week. Don't forget about it till tomorrow. Send them a message today, right now, to really let them know how much they matter to you and how much you really want to continue cultivating that friendship and keeping them in your life. Because even though you might think, oh, they already know, oh, I don't have to say it out loud or write it down, they might not know. And it might be something that they really need to hear today.
I need to hear that today because there has been a friend that has been on my mind for the past week. And I keep thinking, send them a message. And somehow another day goes by and I do not. So I will do that tonight. Thank you for the invitation.
Excellent.
What has been missing in our society and culture on the topic of friendship from your perspective? Is there anything you want people to reconsider?
Yeah, it's something that I think about a lot and that I honestly anticipate we're going to see a lot more of in the coming 5 to 10 years, maybe 5, 10, 20 years. And it's a reevaluation of the way that we make our quote unquote adult life choices and seeing the way that prioritizing friendship will actually become a much bigger part of that. And one of the primary ways that I anticipate we might see more of this is in the choices that people make around how and where they live, particularly with ideas around co housing, with ideas around intentional community. I'm very, very curious to see how the renewed appreciation for friendship will affect the way that people choose how and where they live with each other.
I was just talking to a friend and I said, like in my dreams, all of my other friends will live on the same street as me. And
Yep.
when we all retire, we don't need to live in the same house, but I think the same street would be great.
Mm,
I love to consider how we can rethink families, chosen families, which for me, my friends are really part of my chosen family.
same. Yeah, definitely.
Kat, is there anything I have not asked you that you want to share?
No, I really loved all the questions that you asked and the stories that you shared. This was really fun to do.
Thank you so much for making the time to join me today
Thank you
and
for
for
inviting me.
writing the book.
Yeah,
We should
yeah.
get together.
Absolutely. Thanks for reading it. Thanks for reaching out. Thanks for inviting me on the podcast. This was great. And I encourage listeners to reach out as well. They could head to weshouldgettogether.com, hop on the newsletter. I'd love to connect.
If you think that this episode will be useful to a friend or a family member, please share it with them. And if you take a few minutes to leave a review wherever you're listening, that will help other people find the show. Do you have a question for me or a topic that you would like me to cover in an episode of the podcast? Reach out at contact@changesbigandsmall.com. Remember, change begins with one small step. Have a great week.